hour. So we will go ahead with today's webinar. Today's webinar is titled The Business Solutions Professional Approach, Connecting Extension to Workforce and Economic Development. My name is David Civitolo, and I will be facilitating this session today. Scott typically is the session facilitator, but he is at a meeting in Washington, D.C., so I will be filling. I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Our first speaker will be Michael Polzin. Michael is an associate professor in the School of Human Resources and Labor Relations at Michigan State University. He co-developed the curriculum for this program, as well as shares principal training responsibilities. Joining him today is Donna Winthrop, and Donna is a specialist in the School of Human Resources and Labor Relations, and also co-developed the curriculum and shares principal responsibilities. Before I turn it over to them, I ask that chat box. Answer those. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Michael and Donna.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, David. I'm Mike Polzin.
I'm Donna Winthrop.
And we'll be talking today. We are going to be sharing our experiences working with this business solutions professional approach, and we're going to be applying the principles that we used and learned and developed through this process to how it might be applied with primarily for university extension faculty and staff. We recognize that it is has been a very valuable tool here in Michigan and has substantially helped the workforce and development and economic development efforts in this state, and we believe that it has potential for application in other locations as well. So we're very happy to have an opportunity to talk with you today. What we're planning to, before we get to the objectives of the session, we'd like to point out that these are primary words to remember as we go through this presentation. We kind of came to the realization that these are really at the core of this whole process, this whole approach, and really and provides a lot of guidance to people who are just beginning to use this particular approach, because it oftentimes requires them to stray from what is their traditional work, from the traditional approaches to their work. The first one is let no visit or encounter with the business be wasted. And by that we mean it is to use every opportunity that you have in engaging with the business to use that as an opportunity to identify what the business needs, and also to think about what are some of the resources that might be able to be applied to address those business needs. So let no visit or encounter with the business be wasted, and recognizing that every visit or encounter presents an opportunity to discover the business needs and to connect that business with the appropriate resources. So our objectives for this session, we really have it broken down into three primary areas. The first is we're going to be talking about the business solutions professional, or the BSP approach as we talk about it here. We're going to be identifying what the outcomes of applying that BSP approach have been here in Michigan. Then we're going to provide more information about what that approach consists of by focusing on the primary elements. And then we're going to be talking a little bit about some ideas that we have about how this approach might be applied with university extension professionals and how they might be able to diffuse this particular approach in their work. We do not believe or don't claim to be experts in the university extension profession, but we do have some knowledge of it, and we recognize that it provides, the extension system provides a network that could be used as a vehicle for diffusion of this particular approach. That's why we're going to be talking about it today.
The BSP approach is a new way of working for people who are professionals in the field. It gives them new skills to help identify what business needs are, and then to connect those businesses to the resources they need. And this is just as part of their everyday work.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but we have a couple folks that are having some problems hearing. So, Rosa, would you be so kind as to put some hints down in the chat box to help folks out if they're having some problems hearing? Thank you.
One thing I also want to mention, you found the chat box very, very easily, and we will certainly welcome questions throughout the presentation, and we'll entertain those questions as they come along, so long as we are not getting close, getting pinched for time in completing all of the elements of the presentation that we wish to discuss. So if you have questions, please insert them in the chat box and we'll respond as quickly as we can. So just as a little bit of review, key definitions are worth noting here. Workforce development consists of any and all publicly supported organizations that provide services and resources to job seekers, to dislocated workers, as well as to businesses. Typically, these are funded through the Workforce Investment Act, but not always exclusively. And their workforce development in each state typically has its own network of people that is, in many ways, a statewide network. That was the case here in Michigan. The Workforce Development Network was the vehicle that we use primarily for diffusing this innovation, but it is not the only one that can be applied in these cases as well. The other definition is of economic development. That is local or regional efforts that focus on attracting and retaining businesses and supporting business growth and development. Now, economic development in Michigan is not organized on a statewide basis. There is a statewide entity that focuses on economic development, but most economic development is done at the regional or local level. So there is not congruence between the two systems entirely. In fact, there's oftentimes lack of congruence, which creates the kinds of silos that promote the disconnectedness that often exists between these two systems. Now, with respect to what this approach has allowed us to do here in Michigan, we should say that we have been applying this approach since 2007. 2007 was the first cohort that we trained through this, to use this process. And since then, we have trained 14 additional cohorts of people from throughout the state. What it has resulted in is a stronger integration and connectedness of workforce development, economic development, post-secondary education, business services, state and local government, and also extension practitioners and professionals as well. Also, what we found through an informal study that was conducted by the Michigan Department of Energy, Labor, and Economic Growth about a year and a half ago was that more jobs were saved and created using this approach than using a traditional silo-based approaches. And these results were corroborated independently through analysis by the Center for Economic Analysis here at Michigan State University. Also, it has resulted in the creation of a vibrant, robust, and dynamic network of over 550 practitioners scattered throughout the state. These people all speak the same language. They all understand the same concepts. They recognize that they are part of a network and they have the ability to interact with each other in various ways, electronically, as well as by phone, as well as individually. Some of these practitioners have organized themselves into regional networks as well. It provides additional strength to their capabilities. So it is a constantly evolving network as well as they continue to find other ways to be able to utilize the capabilities that they have collectively. And also the other thing that we found is that the transactional interventions that people are taught to really to be able to use this approach with often lead to strategic community development initiatives too. And that's why we made the connection with extension, that it has really broader implications for not just helping address the problems of an individual business, but it has greater potential to address various kinds of issues and problems that affect an entire community or region, because it brings people together who don't normally come together to talk with each other and allows them the opportunity to talk about things that they don't normally talk about. So it gives and from that come ideas, and those ideas result in initiatives that they decide to take on in various ways.
So the approach allows individual practitioners to work directly with businesses to strengthen them, but to also then to identify those opportunities for regional economic development.
The elements of the business solutions professional approach consist of these 5, and we're going to go into a little bit more explanation of each in a minute. But the first is developing relationships with business. Second is having knowledge of the assets that are available to assist business. Now, some might call them resources, some might call them services. We just use the term assets, and it's fairly widely used in these parts. But the term isn't so much important. The concept is really what's more important, is having a good knowledge of what those things are. Also being able to develop partnerships with people from other domains. So for example, for workforce development practitioners to be able to develop partnerships with people in economic development. And what that means is that they're able to rely on them. They're able to know that if they go to them for assistance or for questions or whatever, that they can rely on them to deliver the kinds of things that they say that they can deliver. It also involves creating networks and expanding those networks so as to be able to have opportunities to provide more outreach as well as to be able to gather more information. And then the final element is the structured intervention method, which we'll talk about a little in more detail. The overall approach is driven by business demands. Now, this is something that is, first of all, the term is used, but isn't always mean the same thing. Business demands, as we define it, means finding out what the business needs. This does not mean finding out what the business needs that you have to offer. It's about finding out what the business needs. And maybe what you have to offer is something that will address that, but maybe it's what somebody else has to offer from one of the other domains that is really what that business needs. So it's driven by those business demands. It's very critical. That's the driving force. And that's why it's so important to remember, let no visit or interaction with a business be wasted. So a demand is any condition or need which hinders a business's ability to compete. So you can see by looking at that little diagram that there are actually several. There could be financial demands, there could be internal process needs that have to be addressed, there could be needs for learning and growth, there could be customer needs. There are a variety of things that could be a need that the business has that hinders its ability to compete. And so it's those demands that business solutions professionals are taught to respond to. This is just another way to look at the elements of the business solutions professional approach. We illustrate it in this method to show that they are all related, but the structured intervention method that we apply is really at the core. This is what drives the whole process. It is the intervention method that people are taught to apply regardless of what their position is, regardless of what their role is, regardless of what the agency is that they work with. This is still the same approach that they're taught to apply, in addition to whatever work that they have to do to meet the responsibilities of their employer.
But this approach has to have the other elements in place in order to work. So it depends on the knowledge of assets. It depends on having a network of people to call on. It depends on being able to work in partnership. It depends on having relationships with businesses.
So, assets are services and resources that are available to business at little or no cost to help them survive and thrive. So, for example, SBTDC, Small Business Technology and Development Centers. We have a number of them in this state. I'm sure that you have them in your respective states as well. They are really critical partners to be involved in this effort. We've had a number of people from those agencies become business solutions professionals themselves, so that actually helps them to understand when a business solutions professional contacts them. It also helps to strengthen those networks that help the outreach process altogether.
There are manufacturing extension partnerships across the nation. In Michigan, ours is called the Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center. They provide a range of resources to businesses, from going lean to new product development.
And also local nonprofits, community colleges, and others, including Extension, are also assets that can be made available. There are a number of state agencies that have resources that can be provided, and we teach people to even differentiate between the regulatory aspect of occupational safety and health agencies and the education sides of occupational safety and health, because those are very, very important sometimes for meeting the needs of business. What we found is that businesses have very little knowledge of the depth and breadth of assets that are available to them and how to access them. We find this when we have the training process itself. Our participants tell us that. That's one of the needs that they say that this program, this approach helps to address. We also find the same thing when we do our post-training evaluation process, where our participants say that when they are asked what is one of the most valuable things that you learn from this training, they learn about the assets that are available to assist businesses and how to be able to communicate that with businesses.
So this approach allows us to address the gap between those resources that are available and businesses' use of them. With business relationships, it's important that we develop, or that our practitioners develop, a reputation within the community as being a capable provider of a wide range of services. So when someone comes in from workforce development, they're not just seen as trying to place someone, but are really interested more in what's going on with the business. We look at building trust with businesses so that they will share what their problems and concerns are. And this is hard. Business people don't like to tell us what's not going right. There are a variety of reasons why they keep this to themselves. But so we have to have a relationship that allows that business person to be able to share with us what they really need. And then we're demonstrating effectiveness through those successful interventions. So we're continuing to build those business relationships by the way we're behaving with businesses.
Initially, we find that people are a little bit concerned about this. They wonder how they're going to be able to develop that kind of relationship with business, and it's really when the effectiveness of the approach is demonstrated that wins the day. So at first, they may have to be engaged in some sort of cold calls, or introducing people to the process, or introducing them to the fact that maybe now, for example, if they're in workforce development, they do more than just assist job seekers. They're really focusing on assisting businesses as well. Sometimes that takes a little while to be able to demonstrate that, but once the business community becomes aware of how effective these interventions can be for their purposes, those cold calls will cease, and people will just be responding to calls that are made and directed to them by businesses that are seeking assistance. That's what our experience has been over the last 5 years, is that those people who have established their reputation by applying this particular approach never have to make any cold calls. In fact, they barely have time to do that. They're always responding to other kinds of needs that have been expressed to them by businesses or by some of their other partners. Building relationships, effective networks is another really important element of this process, and that consists of building relationships that generate information on developments within the business community. So it's about attending some of those fraternal organization meetings, or some of those social organization meetings, like Kiwanis or Lions or Chambers of Commerce or some others. But it's participating, it's by being visible, by making yourself available to, accessible to people, and it is also about being able to share with them how some of the things that you're doing within your agency are now focused much more closely on what the needs of the business are. It's also about building relationships that provide information on other assets and ideas that may be of use to the business, to businesses and to the community. So one of the things that we oftentimes encourage people to do is just to become more and more aware of what else is going on around them. And once people begin that process, they become amazed at the number of initiatives that are going on, many of them that they've never heard of before, many of which may not have a whole lot of practical value for them or for their clients or their prospective clients, but some that may have tremendous value at some point, and some that will maybe perhaps the potential will not be realized for a while yet. But those things are all really important, because we operate under the belief that in order to solve the problems that we have to be able to do things in ways that were different than what resulted in the problems being created in the first place. So the other part about sharing networks is sharing information that stimulates greater knowledge and understanding of what is available, and contributes to realization that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
For the last, or the fourth of the 5 elements, partnerships. Partnerships and organizations really helped the community to succeed by working together, by coming out of our individual agencies and working with each other. There's much greater depth to what we are able to do. But partnerships are not easy. There may be agency reasons why people have not worked together, but this can work at the individual level where people decide, they identify other service providers who work with businesses and they establish relationships with them. Partnership does require intentionality and regular communication. The partnerships really are needed because all of the assets needed to help a business do not reside in any one entity or any one service providers. And it really is the partnership that gives the network its power, because there are always other people you can call on to help with that business.
So those 4 elements really all support and the intervention method that is at the core. All of them have to be present in order for it to be effective. The intervention method is, some of you may recognize it as a fairly straightforward process consulting model. It is fairly simple to follow, although it is one that isn't always followed by people who are not used to doing this particular thing. And many of the people who have, I'd say most of the people who participate in this training do not have any exposure or experience to a process intervention model such as what it is that we're discussing here. But it consists of 5 parts, and we teach each part separately so as to build some mastery of that, some understanding of it, and understanding of how to apply it, and how not to be overwhelmed when provided with an opportunity to be able to use this particular method. So the first step is entry, or the initial encounter, the initial engagement with the business, and that's really about building rapport. The next step is fact-finding, which is a process of discovery. That's a process of really using questions and dialogue to be able to understand more clearly what it is that the business needs. The next step is designing a solution, and there are various options that are considered. There are various assets that are considered to suggest to the business. And to discuss with the business before actually settling on a particular solution. Then there's also the process of implementation. So just coming up with a plan isn't sufficient. Making it happen is really what's necessary, and there needs to be some oversight of that process. And also following up on the implementation. It's making sure that the implementation was done effectively. Also, if it was successful or not successful, did it satisfy the customer, and is there anything else that can be accomplished then? Are there new targets that could be set based upon the success of this particular intervention? The value of the intervention method is that it requires defining the business needs before attempting a solution. Now that may seem like a simple task, but it is oftentimes not. Many times we are taught to be quick at coming up with a solution without really fully understanding all of what is involved in the problem. This process requires defining those business needs first and then attempting a solution. It also informs your client about how you work. So this is not about necessarily substituting for management within that organization. It is about working in partnership with the business and coming up with solutions that they agree are going to be most effective to meet their needs. It requires engaging the business stakeholders because there is no process without them. It allows you to anticipate what will occur at each stage of the process, recognizing that when you are engaged in entry, you may or may not be moving quickly to fact-finding, or fact-finding may come at another opportunity, at another meeting. It enables you to involve your partners throughout the entire process. It all starts, though, with a trigger event. It starts with a trigger, maybe a lead of some sort, which requires additional information before deciding what to do. So it could be a rumor, It could be an observation that the practitioner makes. It could be insider, non-official information on a business. It could come just by something that a business owner or manager says when meeting with him or her on some occasion. In any event, there's something that suggests that maybe there is that would be worthwhile to follow up.
With this approach, if you hear a rumor in your community that a business has lost a contract or they've lost another contract and people are concerned about losing their jobs or about the survival of that business, then that's what we would call a lead, something to be investigated further to see. Somebody needs to step in and see if there is any help to give that business. One, is it true they've lost the contract or not? But this is what we mean by a lead. It's following up on something that may be a problem for a business and you may be able to add to a solution.
A lead may also be something as simple as fewer cars in the parking lot, or fewer people sitting in a restaurant on a Friday or Saturday night when most other restaurants are full, or turning people away. I mean, there's a lot of ways in which this information can be discerned, and we're not trying to say one or another, but there is something that suggests that maybe there is another visit that may be called for. So then moving on to what then the trigger event leads to. It leads to the first step of the process, which is called entry. And entry is about getting started. It's about how can I build a relationship with this business. And so if it's requested by the employer or referred by a partner, the door is open to you, but you still must prepare for the first meeting. So maybe you're making the contact initially, maybe someone else is suggesting that you make this contact, but it does require that you get prepared in some fashion so that you're not caught unawares when you begin to have a conversation with that particular employer. It might be about finding out more about what they do, getting a sense as to whether anyone else in the community has worked with that business in the past. Some very simple questions, some can be answered by looking them up on the internet, seeing what kind of a presence they have on the internet. If they don't have a presence, that's a clear indication of a problem that they have already. Things of that sort would be the kinds of things that you do to get started, but thinking about how can I build a relationship with this business? Because what you want to do is you want to be able to build confidence in the business, in your own capabilities to be able to help them. If they have confidence in your ability to help them, then they're more willing to confide in you what some of those needs are that they might have.
As Mike said, this is about building that relationship. So it may seem obvious to many of you. Of course, I'm going to prepare before I go in. But what we found is not everyone really gives some thought to how they build that relationship, how they will begin to get that business to trust them. So that's why we include this step and talk about what are those things that you do to make that person more comfortable in talking to you.
The next step is fact-finding. Now, depending upon the situation, that may be at the same meeting in which entry occurs. It may be at a separate meeting. It is not any single right or wrong way to do it, but it really is situational based, and it kind of it's many ways determined by whether or not the right people are in the room at that particular time when you first engage in entry to be able to have the kind of conversation that's necessary. But fact-finding is really about finding out what this business needs. So it's about finding out, asking what is the current business situation. So one asks questions. Their questions are open-ended. One makes statements. One makes observations that may come from sitting in the lobby of the building, or maybe you've had an opportunity for a plant tour or a business tour or something. But it's using what knowledge that you have about the business to be able to open up broader and perhaps deeper conversations about what's actually going on within that business. So it is really about inviting discussion. Then the next step from that is, what does that information mean? What are the problems or the opportunities that are facing the business? Reviewing what the facts are, analyzing the information that you have. And then it's also at the same time or following, thinking about what assets may help the business. Now, businesses may tell you what it is that they want, but not always will it be the case that what they want is what they actually need. And that's an important consideration as well. We're focused on what they need, not necessarily about what they want. And so this fact-finding process helps to differentiate between those wants and needs, and helps to be able to clarify more clearly what those needs might be. The next step in the fact-finding, we should say, is it may take varying lengths of time. It depends upon the complexity of the situation. It depends upon the number of people that might be involved. It depends upon probably the size of the business also. Maybe fact-finding occurs in one meeting. Maybe it occurs over several. You might have to invite some partners in to, with the permission of the business, of course, to assist with the fact-finding process. In any case, regardless of the length of time, regardless of who is involved, it's of paramount importance that those who are involved can make a pledge of confidentiality to the business, that they will not reveal any information about the business to anyone without the express permission of the business. So even with sharing information with partners, one has to get permission from the business in order to be able to do that. And that confidentiality is going to be very key. So after fact-finding, then is solution design. And the question becomes, how can the business needs be met? These are conversations that may be done by the individual that initiated the contact with the business. It may also be one that involves one or more partners who have insights that are going to be important to even understanding as well as addressing the problem, or who have resources that can be of importance in trying to address that problem as well. So the questions are, what are the options? Discuss the findings with the business at this time too, and consider what those options might consist of. So this is not a part of the process that is done in isolation with the business, from the business. Some of it might be done away from the business, some of the pre-thinking, but eventually those conversations have to occur with the business being a full participant.
That's because you're not doing it to the business, it's working with the business to come up with what's going to work best for them.
So one of the questions that really is the accommodating question is, what is the best solution at this time? And once that's arrived at, then it's working with the business to develop and discuss that proposal and develop a plan, which the plan would be really focused on implementation. Who does what? Who does it? When does it occur? Where does it occur? Who leads or coordinates the implementation? In many cases, it often requires spelling out or clarifying what is the timeline by which things need to occur in order for the whole intervention to be successful. Following the solution design is implementation. And how do we carry out the solution? How are efforts coordinated between partners and the employer? What kinds of things need to occur in order to prepare the business for the intervention to take place, or for the implementation to take place? What is the monitoring process? Who will have the responsibility for that? What is the process for resolving any problems that might occur during the implementation process? These are things that have to be discussed. These are things that have to be planned out and responsibilities assigned to make sure that nothing drops through the cracks.
So the solution might be something that's confined in the sense of particular skills training that employees need. The implementation is much simpler. The process, the problem may involve a lot of waste in the system, so you're looking at going lean. That's a different kind of implementation that occurs. So a lot of planning goes into the implementation of lean.
Following implementation is the very cleverly named follow-up. And that is basically you're checking to see how are things going. What happened with the implementation? It's very important to check the results with the business and to see whether or not the business was satisfied, or if if the overall effort exceeded their expectations. But you're also thinking about, what can I do to build a stronger relationship with this business, or maybe how does a stronger relationship with this business help me to develop relationships with other businesses too? One of the ways to do that is to inquire about future needs If there are none, or if things are satisfactory for the moment, then there would be a cordial exit that would be discussed, and with the knowledge that the business could call upon the business solutions professional at any time in the future. Just a quick note here to give you an idea of, we made a claim earlier that over 550 individuals from around the state have participated in this training, and I should say that the way that we did this training was over a period of days, with some of those days separated by a period of 3 to 4 weeks so that people had time to process the information. There is not any particular set pattern to how the training might be done, and we expect also that depending upon the needs of an individual state or region, that they may want to do some things in some different ways than what we did them here in Michigan. But within Michigan, we had over 550 people that we've trained so far. Of those, about 273 were, they identified themselves as primarily responsible for business services but they worked for workforce development agencies. We had another 89 individuals whose primary responsibility was the career services side of the house, which was working more specifically with job seekers, maybe some intake roles, maybe it was about career counseling, maybe it was about helping them with resume building, or maybe job readiness skills or things of that sort. They still also worked with the workforce development system. There were 89 of those individuals. It's important that there are people who are working directly with businesses be involved in this, but it's also very important that people who are supporting those who are working directly with businesses be involved as well, so that when there's a demand that becomes clarified, they're able to respond quickly and know why they need to respond quickly. Within our cohort of over 550 people, there were 83 people who worked in local or regional or statewide economic development agencies, and this included 4 people from Michigan State University Extension Services. We had about 58 people whose primary responsibility was providing businesses services within the education realm. These were mostly community college individuals, but not entirely. We had some state university people as well. There were also 10 people who worked primarily with job seekers from the education domain, and then there were another 29 individuals who were from various other aspects, various other roles, which included maybe a city manager, included a number of state employees who were not assigned to any particular task or region. But anyway, it shows the distribution of people who have participated in this particular training.
Other people who were in the training included union representatives. In Michigan, we have still a number of businesses that are unionized, so we felt important that people who are representing organized labor were part of the training as well.
So the diffusion process by which it occurred in Michigan, because we think that this is useful for others to know as well. First of all, when you think about the collective system, that 550 people, they were not all from the same agency, and at the time, those agencies were not integrated, or they were really not connected. There may have been connections that occurred between individuals or pairs of individuals, but for the most part, they were not connected. There was also a widespread recognition that this collective system was being sub-optimized, that there were actually ways in which they could have amplified their overall efforts and outcomes if they were to work more together. There was also there was a need for that integration and connectedness to be championed. It had to be championed by somebody. Somebody had to drive that process. Now, there were 2 or 3 champions that were involved in this. One was the agency that funded us. That was the Michigan Department of Energy, Labor, and Economic Growth. And they were a very big supporter. They funded this program for 5 years over 3 different contracts. And there were also, what we found is that some of our initial participants, our early participants, became the champions for this process for others. So we did not really have to spend a lot of time recruiting individuals to participate. We only really did that for the very first cohort that we conducted. After that, there was a waiting list, always, of people who wanted to participate. The champion had to have access to resources and the ability to facilitate diffusion. Now, in this case, Department of Energy, Labor, and Economic Growth, they used pass-through Workforce Investment Act dollars to fund this, so they had access to resources. They also had, the workforce development system is a statewide system in Michigan, so there was a network in place that provided a great portion of the diffusion capabilities for this effort overall. What was interesting, too, is we've oftentimes speculated on this particular aspect, that there was a lot of transformation that occurred between, in the extent to which there was integration and connectedness between each of these particular domains: education, workforce development, economic development, and so forth. And we speculate that what would have been, if it would have been different, had this been mandated or imposed by some agreement that took place at the upper levels of executive management within the state. And we don't believe that it actually would have had the same degree of success. We think that it actually had a great deal of success because there was a champion. The champion was a strong supporter, but the diffusion actually occurred more at the grassroots level, where the word of mouth from the people who participated from one session and began to apply this approach to their own work on a daily basis. They were able to encourage, and they were actually they were able to encourage and intrigue others into participating in future training. So there was a lot of energy that was saved actually by this particular approach, and I think that the effect overall was much more successful. So the Michigan diffusion process, real briefly, I noticed what time it is, and we want to have some time for questions too. Our effort was a statewide effort. Most of the sessions, about 10 of the 15 sessions, were conducted from our East Lansing location, and it brought together people from around the state. But there were 5 sessions that were done for specific regions within those regions around the state, and they were very, very popular and very well populated as well. I mentioned before, initially participants were recruited, but after the first cohort was in place, there was a waiting list, and we really did not have to recruit much at all. This was not a mandated change, and it was also fully funded by the state, so there was very little cost to individuals. Now, subsequent to our contract with the state, and its expiration, we have conducted one cohort already with individuals whose agencies paid for them to participate in the training, and we expect that we will be doing more as well.
And following up on what Mike had said about it not being a mandated change, this really was a grassroots effort. That is, we were training practitioners, and it did not require hiring any new staff. It does not require any kind of reorganization. It is really about the professional development of those practitioners, those people who are in contact with businesses, and then giving them the support they need to act in this way.
And that was, I think, one of the most powerful aspects of this too. For a relatively small investment on the part of the state, they trained 550 people to actually provide this same approach in a coherent and cohesive manner around the state, and without adding any staff of their own. We've thought about this a little bit from the perspective of extension, and we just want to offer a few thoughts to perhaps stimulate some of your own thinking about how this approach may be applied within extension, for example. So from the perspective of extension as a champion, extension exists, there's a presence of a regional and statewide structures and frameworks which also provide vehicles for diffusion to occur. There's the existence of a network of professionals in the field who also have standing in their communities. That is, that they are respected, they're looked up to, they're called upon as experts, that they have a great deal of credibility already. So that does not have to be, that factor does not have to be taken into consideration. They have a great deal of credibility, and so they're listened to perhaps more than would be someone who is coming from another agency that perhaps does not have the same reputation with people within the community. Extension agents are able to lead and connect with workforce and economic development agencies and professionals. Many of them may already do that. It is also very consistent with the land grant mission to be able to apply this kind of an approach and to have this kind of a focus. And it also optimizes what extension staff currently provide. It provides an opportunity to be able to build on capabilities that they already have. It's a tool that they can use as they have other tools. It's a tool that they can use to perhaps further develop the work that they're already doing.
It really becomes a habit of mind, this way of thinking that what I want to do is to discover needs and connect those businesses to those resources that they need.
So this brings the end of our presentation. We wanted to offer the opportunity for anyone to ask any questions which they may have been holding back in asking.
Hi, Mike. This is David Civitolo. I want to thank you and Donna for really an excellent presentation. Folks out in the field, if you have some questions, I'd like you to, if you could, type them up in the chat box, which is the bottom part of your monitor. Or if you could send them in there, we would appreciate it. Mike and Donna, perhaps while we're waiting for a question, I could ask you one. For the folks in the field, what advice would you give them starting out, or if you could do it over again, what things would you look at a little bit differently?
We're thinking.
I think perhaps we would focus a little more on the champion role. Make sure that, I mean, here we did have workforce development as the champion. We have 25 different agencies in Michigan, though, that make up the workforce development. If we could have done a little more work with them at the agency level, I think to build some support for the practitioners, that would have been helpful.
And I would say also building a stronger integration at the local or regional level early on, trying to do that. We left that in many ways to individuals from those regions, but having a more of an intentional approach to strengthening those local relationships would be, I think, very helpful, because as we said before, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and as people become more familiar with their collective capabilities and interests, which are not always the same as their professional capabilities and interests, then the whole effort amplifies, and it has great potential for taking on other kinds of initiatives that may be beyond the scope of just simply trying to assist and help develop or address the needs of an individual business. One of the things I want to make sure that we're very clear on, though, yes, the business was the primary focus, but the reason why the business was the primary focus because without the business, we couldn't save or create jobs. And so that was, I think that was implicit. That was the implicit goal throughout this whole effort. It was about saving and creating jobs. But we chose to do that by focusing on the needs of the individual business.
Thank you.
And thank you, Marcia, for your testimony there. Marcia was, I'm not exactly sure what cohort she was in, but one of our prize graduates here, and Marcia has chatted along with others that she would highly recommend it, easily incorporated in your everyday work. And I think that that's an important point, is that it doesn't require someone to change their job. It doesn't require them to, it doesn't require a specific role as business solutions professional. It's an approach that can be applied, as Marcia says, in your everyday work.
Michael, Donna, if you can see in the chat box, we do have a question from Ken Larimore. Can you see that?
Yes, yes. So the question in the past, Ken wrote, many corporate officers have moved away. How do you make contact with the real decision makers when they're difficult to reach? The initial attempt is at the local level, of course, and we've had examples, we had situations like this where there was a corporate leadership that was involved, and there were I think, combined efforts between the maybe a small group of business solutions professionals that also included the local management of that particular facility, who met with corporate leadership either when they were on site or even traveled to corporate headquarters to be able to make a case for certain improvements. That actually is a real is a really important issue that BSPs confront. Now, it doesn't happen as often as one might think, because many of the businesses were more locally owned that BSPs were working with. But when working with corporate offices, I mean, it's about questioning. It's really about questioning why they're making decisions that they are, and if it's about things like reducing costs, reducing labor costs, reducing waste, or things of that sort, there are a lot of interventions. There are resources that can be applied to each of those particular challenges that are available through the BSP network that we have in Michigan. So it's really about trying to get them to clarify what their interests are, what's really underneath any decisions that they may or may not be making about that particular facility, and then focusing in on, well, what are the assets that are available to help to address those needs.
And that's a concern that came up continually in the training. What do I do, if the decision maker isn't local? So it's important to find out, is the decision maker local or not? I mean, it is to find out where the decision will be made. If it's being made by corporate, then what is it that they need? And as Mike said, we've had BSPs work with local management on the potential of expanding a plant to put together a proposal that plant manager then takes to corporate as to what this package could look like here.
So the approach can be used successfully in working with businesses at whatever stage they are in the business business cycle. Thank you. A business could be in decline, and this approach can be very helpful. The business could be stable. This could help the business to solidify its stability or to grow. The business may be in need of expansion, or maybe desiring expansion, and it can be very helpful in that. And this can also be used, it has been used very effectively in combination with economic development efforts to attract businesses to new areas, especially when one combines the inclusion of a workforce development proposal along with the economic development proposal. It basically illustrates very clearly and shows how it's going to be paid for to a business, how they're going to have the workforce that they need in order to meet their demands, to meet their production needs. So there's a question here from Godwin, who asked, I'm wondering whether the local Chamber of Commerce in rural areas can also help champion this program. Absolutely.
Yes, there are some of the best people that we have are local chamber people. They really embrace this approach because it gives them new tools, new ways of working with those businesses that they're very familiar with and that they want to help. So our local chamber people, glad you asked that, our local chamber people in our rural areas, they are our champions in this.
And we did have a number of local chamber people that participated and actually earned the lapel pin that one gets from completing the training, as well as the field work that required for certification. And we just included them among those who are in the economic development category that you saw on a slide earlier.
One of our participants described his experience in the training like being a kid in a candy shop. He was a city manager in a small town. And he said this gave him so many tools, so many ways of helping his businesses. He was so excited, but that was his words, that It's like being a kid in a candy shop.
And the follow-up part of your question, how can Extension partner with Chamber of Commerce in this regard? I think it's about becoming familiar with what this approach consists of and beginning to talk about what the needs are within the particular area, a particular area served by the Chamber of Commerce, maybe identifying what some of the gaps are, but also becoming much more familiar with what the assets are that are available to help those businesses. And one beauty of this, at least as we've applied it in Michigan, and I think we'd probably be very similar in your states as well, is that the economic development activity is local, workforce development activity is primarily local, business needs are primarily local, but the assets available to assist them are not local. They don't have to be local. They can be brought in from a variety of areas. That part doesn't matter. So even though a particular community may not have a small business technology and development center staff available, but most of them do anyway in some fashion, may not have somebody who has expertise in lean work systems or high performance work systems or in developing marketing plans, but those assets can be brought in from other areas as long as the providers of those assets are partners within this overall process.
Give everyone a moment if there's any last questions as we're coming up to the top of the hour. Those that are still with us, if you have a moment, please fill out the summary webinar evaluation. And up on the screen right now are the presenter's contact information.
So our contact information is there on the screen. If anyone cares to follow up with a question or a comment at another time, we certainly would invite comments as well as questions, and we're happy to assist as much as we are able.
Now, something we didn't talk about today that we do have, if anybody's interested in learning more, we did through our local campus radio station, WKAR, and television station, produce videos that give examples of what this process looks like. They were role plays in a sense, simulations, but it gives one a sense of what it actually looks like in play when consulting with a business.
Well, I thought there was one more question, but apparently not. Oh, there is one. Michael and Donna, do you have time to address that?
Yes, we're looking at that. We're ready to talk about that, actually. The question is, how can MSUE and BSP join their branding and marketing efforts at the strategic level? I think it comes through with some conversations. I mean, we're certainly open to that. We believe very strongly in this particular approach. We've found it to be very successful, and we would like to see it utilized. We're certainly, it is not a one that hinges on, that is based upon competition between regions or between states. It actually is one that capitalizes on the assets that are available and the strengths that are available in the community to be able to grow that community itself. So it doesn't, there's really no limitation as far as that goes. And I think it's just a matter of our meeting together and talking more about how we might be able to take advantage of the opportunities that joining those efforts together might have. Okay, and Sam asked exactly what was the role and activities of the extension educators. The extension educators were simply participants in the training that we have that we've offered, as anyone else is. They many of them have economic development as part of their, or all of their responsibility, and so they would use this approach. Many of them were not aware of the variety and depth of assets that are available to help businesses. It helped to strengthen their ability to work with businesses in their own regions that they served. It helped them to be catalysts for other kinds of initiatives within their own regions. So it was their role is, it has been I'd say both transactional as well as strategic, that they've had both kinds of applications of this approach within the regular responsibilities, or following from the regular responsibilities of what it is that they do.
Well, great. Thank you very much. Again, contact information is available to the participants if they're interested in following up with Michael and Donna. In addition, this seminar has been recorded and will be available within the next couple of days. And we ask before you depart if you could fill out both survey webinars if you haven't done so already.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We enjoyed having the opportunity to present this to you, and we would enjoy any opportunity to talk with any of you at any future date. Thanks very much.
Thank you.